Welcome to The Naked Podcaster. Get ready to hear the story of someone strong enough to bear it all. The Naked Podcaster is a representation of freeing yourself, giving you permission to be real in all your quirkiness, baggage, struggles to success, and tragedy to triumph. I'm so excited you're joining the journey. Your past doesn't define you, but it does lead you on a path to today. Let's get naked. Hello and welcome to The Naked Podcaster. This is your host, Jen Taylor. Today I'm here with Amber Ezel. Amber, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing, Jen?
Awesome. I don't realize always because I don't look too far ahead. So I'll look at my podcast interviews just shortly before I have them. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know Amber. So we have actually met before, and that is pretty exciting. You have a website, amberezelphotography.com. It'll be in the show notes. But you're a photographer and your site is beautiful. So tell me what you are, what you do, and who you are.
Thank you so much. I'm a portrait photographer, and I like to identify as having a style that's very photojournalistic. I'm obsessed with capturing real emotion and real moments, and maybe that just means that I'm doing goofy things with couples or families that I work with to try and actually get real emotion, real laughs, and real connection. And so I'm always searching for those really in-between moments. I don't do heavy posing. My favorite photos are the ones that are everything with emotion and just that bring out the real personality of my clients. And so I shoot quickly, I shoot in the moment, and I end up not using a lot of photos, but I find the ones that just really, really, really speak to me. So I consider myself photojournalistic. I love shooting weddings. I've done a lot of weddings, but I'm kind of steering more also to both families and headshots and boudoir as additional genres that I'm exploring. Boudoir is something that's new for me, but I'm loving it. I'm loving what it does with empowering women, the experience that I've had with it. It's just been such a beautiful, positive thing for women, and as a way for them to feel strong and confident and beautiful. And it's also just, for me, it's a fun new challenge for me, but still with a very photojournalistic style. I'm just always looking for the real types of photos and real personality.
You have a picture on your website. It's like my favorite family picture. So it's mom, dad, two kids, right? Mom's, It's very in the moment. Mom's looking at dad, dad's looking at the older little girl, but the littlest girl just is making faces. And I love it because she's just completely, I mean, kids have an easier time with that anyway, but she's just totally being herself. So.
Oh yeah. Those are my favorite, when everyone's looking at each other and the kids are doing something silly and mom and dad is laughing and
or have no idea.
Oh yeah.
It's awesome. I'm glad you're doing more boudoir because it's not on your website that I remember seeing, but that's
I just did a shoot with a woman that actually, she just had a double mastectomy this week, sadly for breast cancer. And I did a shoot with her just last week. And so I'm working on those images, and she hasn't even seen them yet. And so once I have a couple more, a little bit more of a portfolio going, I'm going to pop those on my site.
I love it. I've done some of them, and I chose a specific photographer because he did not pose. Mm-hmm. So it was much more art. I mean, there were a couple that were posed, but most of it was like, let's just do this. Well, let's wing it and do this. And best pictures ever.
Woman, that's awesome. Yeah, because every person is different. Every woman is different. You kind of have to read the person and see how they feel and how they want to portray themselves in the images, but definitely winging it and being natural. That's awesome that you had that experience.
Yeah. And I love it. I've done a couple of them, but I mean, even when women are uncomfortable, first, I think if women are uncomfortable, that's a shame because there's beauty in everything.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, I love the fun, spontaneous. Wow, I look pretty good in that picture.
Yeah.
So take us back. You live in Reno, Nevada, where I live now. But you were raised in Orange County, California.
Well, I'll start with the fact that I was born and raised Mormon, and I was in South Orange County. So a very, an area where appearance and being a certain way is just so part of the culture down there. And I I don't know, grew up, I don't know if you, Real Housewives of Orange County, it's the community, like literally right adjacent to there. I went to school with the kids of that show. And so it was a lot of pressure growing up in that area, and a lot of, everything's based on looks and being a certain way. And then the Mormon church had its own kind of extreme structure of being a certain way. And it wasn't until in 8th grade that my parents went through some serious marital stuff, and everything shook up with the church, and they ended up leaving the church, and it just put me in a position where I had to decide if what I believed, because basically it was like, well, our family's not going to be together in the highest degree of heaven and all this. And it was very catastrophic for me when my parents stopped going to church, and it forced me to look inward and see what I truly believed. And so there was a year or two, freshman, sophomore year in high school, that I just did a lot of praying, journal writing, soul searching. And I was actually at EFY. I was a youth camp, essentially, for the church that I had. Just a really intense realization within myself of, oh my goodness, all religion is beautiful. Everyone's trying to get to feel spirituality. Everyone's trying to get closer to God, essentially. And so I decided that the Mormon church was not the only way, and that I could get close to spirituality and God within myself in my own way. And so it was a very definitive moment in time where I decided I don't have to be Mormon anymore. I don't need to continue going to church. And I don't need this to be my only sole reality. And so after that, I mean, of course, it's not that easy just to completely rid everything of what's ingrained in you culturally, being raised in the church. And so years went by, and I went to college at Cal State Long Beach, and I still had to go through spiritually, there were different things I was going through, so one thing I'll say that, based off of who I am today and who I've learned I am, is that freshman year in college, I recognized I had feelings towards my female roommate, and I remember thinking, could I possibly be gay, and could I be a lesbian? And I decided that, like, whoa, that's not possible, because I want to get married to a man. Like, that's not possible. I want a family. I want to get married. I want a husband, and I want kids. And so I literally have journal entries where I ask, oh my gosh, what if I'm a lesbian? Because I'm having really intense feelings towards females. And then I basically was just like, no, that's not possible. And so I talked myself out of it, essentially. I studied abroad in Granada, Spain for a year, and I learned Spanish out there. I consider that time in Spain being like just my first or maybe second, because maybe the Mormon church realization was my first. This was my second realization with myself of how to feel comfortable within myself, and how to be somewhere foreign, not knowing the culture or the language, and the intimidating factor of being somewhere essentially alone, and learning to rely on myself. And so during that period of time, I strengthened a lot. I journal wrote a lot. I battled depression. I just learned a lot about myself. Still was not in touch with the fact of my sexuality. I was able to put that to the side somehow. And then I went back for my last couple of years at Cal State Long Beach, ended up doing a Spanish major because I was like, well, I want to continue Spanish. I wanted to continue learning it, being around it. And then I decided when I graduated that, okay, I'm ready to settle down. I'm ready. I didn't date any guys in college, but I was ready to settle down and get married. And because that's culturally what was essentially what I was brought up with. Everyone got married in their early 20s in the Mormon church. And so I decided that I would start dating heavily online. And so I actually ended up meeting my ex-husband online. And when I met him, he was perfect. He checked all the boxes. He's an amazing, silly, lighthearted guy. And he's the father to our daughter. And I couldn't ask for a better father for him. And yeah, we ended up obviously getting married, and it was just basically like perfect. He checked all the boxes. And I ended up working with my dad at Merrill Lynch. It was 2008. The job market was pretty horrible. And I had a Spanish degree, and I wasn't totally dead set on being a Spanish teacher or an interpreter. And so I decided, okay, I'll join my dad's team at Merrill Lynch. I had the opportunity to become financial advisor. I got my Series 766 and started marketing, joining different groups and trying to find clients, which as a 21-year-old female with very minimal marketing or finance background, that was quite intimidating. And it also just wasn't my passion. It wasn't for me. But after 2 years, I wanted to leave to just become a photographer. That was my ex-husband and I got married during that time. I wanted to be a wedding photographer. That was my dream job at the time. I remember my dad asking me, well, if you're not going to work here, what do you want to do? I said, honestly, I want to be a photographer. But I bought a camera and I started taking a couple pictures, but very quickly was like, well, I don't even know where to start. Like, I'm not an expert photographer. I know I've always liked photography. When I was in 8th grade, my dream job was to be a National Geographic photographer.
It's all of our dream. Yeah.
Isn't that everyone's dream? I'm pretty sure. Like every photographer's absolutely dream is that dream. But I was like, that's what I want to do. So anyway, I was always into photography from age 8th grade on. I'd always loved it, but never became an expert at it. Didn't understand how to shoot manual or SLR or anything. Up until around then, I started playing around with my camera, but I decided, okay, actually, what's a more realistic job? Like, I can't just go be a photographer. And so I decided to go back and get my teaching credential, and I did that. I ended up getting my master's in teaching at UC Irvine, and I quit Merrill Lynch right before that, and became a Spanish teacher. And I loved it, actually. I loved the high energy aspect of it. Being at a desk is very hard for me. And so running around the classroom and being silly with kids and having fun, it's just exhausting. It's a ton of work, constant grading, constant everything. And then of course, the pay is just not stellar. And then I did that for 2 years, ended up having our daughter around that time. I was a stay-at-home mom for 2 years. During that time, I picked up my camera and started shooting family portraits, and then I got into second shooting, and then I started doing weddings, all while being a stay-at-home mom. And I loved it. I was like, this is amazing. This was my dream. And what I will say about photography, and this is, I feel like I'm just doing everything, and I don't know, there's so much, it's hard to know what to elaborate on, but with photography, once I started doing families, I all of a sudden made a decision. I'm going to be a professional photographer. I'm going to do this. And I remember telling my ex-husband, like, this is my goal. I'm going to be a professional wedding photographer as soon as I can. And so I started with families. I started second shooting with other professional photographers so that I can learn the ins and outs of shooting weddings. I loved it, absolutely loved it. And I felt like I had pretty good work for not being in it for that long. And, but during that time, I actually started recognizing problems within myself, my sexuality, realizing I was attracted to women. And all of a sudden I was completely freaked out and devastated of what that could mean for me and my ex-husband.
Let's go back before we go forward.
Okay, because I'm kind of
having some experience. You're good. You're awesome. Having quite a bit of experience myself in the Mormon church, but also just in really strict religions, it's not super easy to extricate yourself from that situation.
No, it is not. No.
How difficult back then, I have so many questions, but how difficult was that back then for your parents and then for you? And they let you come to your own decision even though they had decided to stop?
Yes, they did. In fact, my decision ended up actually inspiring my dad. So my mom was the one that she was like, I want out of the church. She was basically their marriage was in shambles. And basically she said, I'm leaving the Mormon church. My dad essentially just left. I shouldn't say left for my mom, but it kind of was that. It was like, he recognized that they could not stay married if he stayed in the church. And so my dad to this day, he culturally, I'd say, is Mormon. He misses the Mormon church. He was just completely, it was just within him. And he left to save the marriage, and he doesn't know, what's true or whatever. And no one does. It's reality. And for me, when I recognized within myself that I didn't have to be Mormon, I came back from that EFY camp. I kept in journal just all day long, writing. And I remember walking through the trees, getting goosebumps, having overwhelming joy and peace of like, oh my gosh, I don't have to be Mormon. Everyone here is trying to be close to God and being close to spirituality, and everyone's just trying. And this is one way. And it's okay. But this doesn't have to be the way for me. And so I told this story to my parents, so excited. Like, this is the decision I came up with. And my dad ended up having his own spiritual moment that was, Amber was right. He tells me that he was in the shower and he had this almost like crazy, like higher level experience where I love the story. Amber was right. That's awesome. But he realized, like, my story inspired him, essentially, that he was able to let go of the Mormon church. And
it's really difficult to do that, even when you feel really comfortable with it. Oh yeah,
it really is.
It really is. Right. And it's an all or nothing reality, and there's no wiggle room, and it's so ingrained and part of you that I just found like you don't know. You have to figure out where you end and it begins, and what parts of it can still be part of you. And it's not like, oh, I'm being the Mormon I want to be because I'm picking and choosing, because there are other religions that are equally as strict and you don't get to pick and choose. But what parts of it are still inspiring to you, and it's okay to still be inspired by things in lots of different religions. But that's a journey that's really tough. It's very cool that your parents were on board with you. Yeah, I know when I was done, I was done. Yeah. I was done. And then when people would say stuff to me, I became angry because you're crossing my line. I'll respect you if you give me the same respect. It's so ingrained. So that's really great. Now you're the oldest of 4.
Correct.
So how was it how you were in 8th grade when this happened? Because that's really hard time.
Oh, it's a really hard time. And my family, we were like the perfect little, I shouldn't say perfect, but it's like my parents were very, very strict in the Mormon church. And like, we couldn't play with friends on Sunday. We couldn't go swimming. We couldn't wear 2-piece bathing suits, like completely full on Mormon family. And 8th grade, I remember, that was the 9/11 was when that same year. So it was a very devastating year. I had practically no friends. I was in a very vulnerable place that year. And then I find out about my parents leaving the church, as well as my parents being on the rocks with their marriage. We didn't know if they were going to stay together. And so, it was during that time. And just like you said, when you leave something like that, especially when you're, a young child, it's like, it's just your entire world. It's your entire reality. And I'm all of a sudden, I'm like, wait, but I want my family to be together in heaven. And you're told that your family, at least my understanding at least was that when you're not all sealed in the temple, that you can't all be together in the highest degree of heaven. And it was really devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. And it's really hard. And I know that when I left the same church, I had those conversations with my kids. Uh-huh. And it's I'm kind of the person that's like, you know what? I've done all the things that I'm supposed to do in the Mormon church. I'm a good person. I'm pretty sure we don't have all the answers and God will figure it out. And I'm sorry that that's difficult to, but
it's scary.
It is scary. It's like everything, because it's such a huge part of your life. It's like, well, if everything in my life is based off of that and now that's not there, what is it based on? Right.
Yeah. You feel like you don't have an anchor.
No anchor at all. So I completely get that. And you're in 8th grade and you're the oldest of 4. How did the other 3 siblings take it?
Me and the sibling closest to me, Heather, it was hardest on us. The younger 2 were like, cool, we don't have to go to church anymore. At that age, it's like they were able to, I don't know. It just, for them, it wasn't it's interesting having conversations with them today. Like the younger 2 were like, the church was just not as big of a deal for them. But me and Heather, we're 3 years apart. It was it was hard. It was really, really hard on her.
Yeah.
Too. I mean, we remember my parents were drinking wine in the closet, and it was like, oh, our parents are getting drunk in the closet. They're sneaking alcohol. And it was like this devastating thing. And remember pounding on the door of like, oh, we know you're in there drinking. And it was just so like devastating. It just feels like your parents are just, I mean, sinning and falling apart. And so, yeah, it was very, very hard on us, me and Heather.
Right. And I had kids, you know, because I was like 33 or 34 when I left the Mormon church, and I never drank in front of them until just probably 5 years ago. Because, and that, like, my oldest daughter's 22. I remember her being 21 and going to a Mexican restaurant being like, will you completely freak if I get a margarita? And she's like, no, because, you know, I mean, she had been out of it for so long by then. Like, it's about time you admitted that you're joining the party, you know, because I went the opposite way. Like, I have to not be part of the Mormon church, but follow some of the rules as well as I can, because there's no reason freaking the kids out and having them think what you like, you're going to go to hell. And still you know, my kids are all like high school and older, and they're like, so you getting drunk? And I'm like, dude, I've been drunk like twice in my entire life. Like, before the Lord, I am not burning in the fires of hell because of this beer.
But when you're totally in the church, it's just like this sin, you know, you're just getting drunk, and it's like such a big deal.
It's such a big deal, which is why so I get it from your parents' perspective and from your perspective. It's a super hard thing to navigate, to kind of let go and be yourself. But not completely tip the scales. But your parents stayed married, and your dad had his kind of like epiphany with you.
Yeah, and again, that was, I was in like 8th or 9th grade. Yeah, 9th or 10th grade at that point, when my dad had that epiphany with me and everything. And since then, I mean, my parents, are still not Mormon. My dad still talks about church. All of my dad's family is Mormon. And so my mom was a convert, actually. And so she joined the church like around age 16, but my dad just has all the Mormon family and the culture behind it. And so, you know, he still says, I wonder if it's true, and who knows, and no one really knows. And so, but as far as the Mormon church goes, it's not in our lives, not my parents' lives. And, which I'm grateful for, because my recent realizations would have been much more devastating if they were active Mormon. Absolutely.
Yeah, but there's a lot of transition. The next thing I want to ask you, you mentioned being in college and how cool that you went to Spain and you did all that stuff, right? Like, that's really great. Yeah. But, and first let's ask, when did you start journaling, and are you still journaling, and have you kept all of them?
I have kept all of them. Yes. I started journaling. Wow. I love this because at this point, it's like a time capsule for me. It's not only a meditative thing for me, but it's also like a time capsule. I can go back. I love it. I started sophomore or freshman year in high school. So honestly, I mean, since the beginning of all of this, it's really cool to like see my first 2 entries ever. And I was just reading them a couple months ago, and it's like the most naive writing. It's like, school's going pretty well. My friends are Vanessa, da 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 da. It's very, and then like a couple months later, it's like, you know, shit starts happening, and it's pretty cool to see the progression of life. And it's like my first boyfriend. So I had one major boyfriend in high school, and I actually say that he was the only man I shouldn't say this for my ex-husband's sake, but like I was absolutely infatuated with him. Brandon was his name, and just completely puppy love over him. And he was quite feminine and artistic and emotional and everything. But anyway, so I kept my journal all through him, and the devastation of us ending and all of that, and just like, complete obsession to like, we're going to get married one day, and we're going to be together forever. And it's just funny. It's so fun to go back and see like your mindset. And you're like, honey, like, you don't actually know anything. It's so fun to see that.
Your pseudo maturity.
Oh my gosh. I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like, I just can't believe it. Or like the amount of emotional dependency I had on him, like was intense. I'm like, oh my goodness, if I was my own daughter, I'd be like, oh, sweetheart, please don't like get too obsessed or whatever. But the reality is, yeah, like I was leaving the Mormon church, and I think I clung to him, like really, I feel like I went, actually I left the Mormon church while I was dating him. So yeah, I think that the emotional dependency on him was really, really high, because it was like I went from the Mormon church to him.
Yeah.
And it was like the only thing of comfort and stability that I had. Like, heaven forbid I'd be on my own with nothing. Oh my goodness. But that came later. I wasn't ready yet.
And I think that's common at that age too, that codependency, which is crazy. And you have this ridiculous idealism that I wish we could keep a little more of as we get older, instead of turning to cynicism. But like, it's very idyllic,
It is.
Skipping and rainbows forever, and everyone else is dumb, but we've got this figured out. Oh yeah. See, I never kept my journals. I never wanted to. Yeah. I didn't journal quite as much as you did, but no, I mean, no, I didn't want to see that. But
were you afraid of someone else finding them, or was it more like you just didn't?
Yeah, and that leads me to a kind of my next question. Yes, I didn't want people to read them, and I felt like I know that one process is when you write down really, really tough stuff, and then you can throw it in the fireplace, like to let it go a little bit. I think for me, it was cathartic to write about it and then be done with it, get rid of it. But I don't have the hindsight that you do. So, I mean, there's pros and cons of every way you do. I think that's so cool. I want to talk about sex. And I also want to talk about depression.
Okay.
So I don't know when you noticed the depression, because you said in college and being alone. And you're still getting past of a lot of the Mormon church stuff, which is no premarital sex, no alcohol, no drugs, no coffee. So as a normal high school, college student, you've got to be curious about that stuff. And you didn't notice any changes in sexuality till your first year in college. So jump in on whichever one of those, which came first and how you want to tackle them.
Yeah. So again, I mean, I was so sheltered in the Mormon church. Like, all my friends were, starting to have sex. And for me, it was like, and now in hindsight, I can see why I didn't care. Because I was like not boy crazy. It's like, I just didn't care about sex. I was like, why don't I care? I'm like, I just didn't get it. And so in high school, I mean, my first boyfriend in high school, we did start exploring. I mean, we ultimately did end up having sex. I was 18 when I did. And so it was later on. But still, we were exploring. We basically had sex during high school. And so leaving the Mormon church, I was able to let myself start exploring that. And he was very, respectful, and which I'm very grateful for, and that we never did anything that I wasn't comfortable with. But for the most part, I was totally okay with all of that. And so, but something happened. I think back, and I'm just like, the actual concept of having sex, like once we got to that point, it was pretty much like we're doing everything else, we're doing oral. I didn't really have the desire to have actual sex. Like once it got to that point, I was okay with not. It wasn't actually until I had I guess I did date, I didn't put this one in the notes, but yeah, I did date Dave. We in college, he was actually the first person I had sex with, and he actually ended up passing away from a serious illness called aplastic anemia. We dated for only 2 months. It was a really just sweet 2-month period, and it was 3 months. It was 2 months, and he went to the hospital. He was just a sweetheart. He was completely just this just sweet, kind soul. And so we ended up, he was the first person I had sex with, as I mentioned. And I don't remember being completely, absolutely needing sex with him, but it was a very just intimate relationship. And yeah, when he went to the hospital, that's a whole nother story, but yeah, it just got way too intense for me at that period. I wasn't convinced that, I mean, we were dating for 2 months, and then his illness got more and more serious, and I knew I was leaving to go study abroad in Spain. A couple months later, he actually passed away only a month into me being in Spain, which spiraled me into depression as well.
Got it. One of the reasons I ask is because I'm not lesbian.
Uh-huh.
But that doesn't mean that I enjoyed sex in the beginning either. Uh-huh. I don't think it's abnormal to like have sex with a woman with a man and be like, yeah, okay. I remember just thinking like, am I missing something?
Right.
Yeah, I was missing the orgasm, but you know, right. I mean, like there's a lot to it. And at that age, sexuality is so confusing anyway. I didn't know if you got any red flags or just...
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was just, yeah, I mean, it's just whatever. It was exactly. I didn't really care for it. I mean, I've had sex with more guys than I would like to admit, you know, but all the time, I mean, not a lot, and I could count on my hands, but it's still like, why did I have sex all those times if I didn't actually really, really want it, you know? It was just kind of like, yeah, unfortunately, it is common. It's like you have information. It's like, oh, well, this is the next thing we do. And okay. And I remember that's when something clicked for me. And I was like, that's when I started thinking, I want to settle down. I want to get married. Because I didn't like that things were starting to spiral. It was like I was in college and date a guy and you meet a guy at a bar. And I mean, that only happened like within a period of like a month or two. All of a sudden it was like, oh, I had sex with 3 guys this last month. And now I'm already up to number 6. And it's just, you know, it just happened. It started happening like that. And it was just like, no. I wasn't even like necessarily wanting it. And it was just, I didn't like that because I never really cared that much. So,
and that's not indicative of being straight or not, but no. I was just, there was no issue there. And then the depression, did you notice the depression? I have found in my experience that the depression came from not being able to admit what you really knew somewhere inside, like at least subconsciously, right? So that's what I'm kind of digging at. You still have lingering Mormon church baggage where maybe it's not rearing its ugly head at all.
Right, exactly.
But like it's one more thing that's totally against a very strict religion, even if you've left it. And I just know from my own experience that can rear its ugly head every once in a while.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, having feelings for a woman where you completely talk yourself out of it.
Yeah. Repressing serious stuff.
Right. And so then you say depression and I'm like, so where did it come from? Lots of places. So this guy dies. That's a really big deal to have a person die.
Yeah. And it just, I mean, that was really, really hard. And then I was already before that very homesick. I mean, I didn't expect to get that homesick. I've always been an adventure seeker. I've always been fearless, whatever, but I get over there and it's like, oh, I don't know anyone and I don't know the language and everything's uncomfortable. And I'm living on this flat with like 6 random people that are all dirty and gross and my room's cold. And it wasn't comfy. It was like out of your comfort zone completely. And then all of a sudden I'm just like feeling very alone. And then, you know, Dave died and then it's just building up. And so but I think like you said, there was a lot of repressed things going on. My parents were going through a second marital crisis where they were very close to getting divorced. So that was going on. So I actually see it as, I mean, I had the opportunity to go for 6 months or a year and I'm like, I want to go for a year. I now wonder, I'm like, was I trying to run away from my problems? I mean, I had a lot of shit going on. I had just admitted in my journal, maybe I could be gay, but no, wait, no. And then my parents tell me they're getting divorced. And then I'm like, I'm going to Spain. I'm going there for a year and I'm leaving. And I get to Spain and it's like hard stop. Holy crap, this is serious stuff. I'm by myself in a foreign country. I was 18 years old. Like, it was just intimidating. It was a lot. And so that's when I started journal writing fiercely out there. I just journal wrote literally like on days that I didn't have school. I just wrote and would walk around the city in different places and different viewpoints and explore what was going on within me. And that really, really helped me. And it also helped me once I was able, about 3 months in, fully start embracing the culture and the language. So I remember I started picking up Spanish. All of a sudden, I felt like I was fluent. I lived with a Spanish woman for the second semester, and so I was speaking with her every day. And I all of a sudden just found my groove out there. First semester was choppy. Second semester, I was learning myself. I got a hoop nose ring and straight across bangs and was dressing very just like hippie, edgy. I don't give a shit. And I just started, just doing my thing and feeling very comfortable out there and speaking Spanish. And so I kind of got through a lot of depression that way. But I think a lot of it was repressed stuff and running away from my parents' problems and from repressed, sexuality and everything. So
everything. Yeah. And someone dying. I mean, it's a lot. So move forward. You're now you find your groove, which is one of the things I was going to ask you about. And then you enjoy the rest of your time in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
So you come back and now you meet your husband. So jump in there.
Yeah. And to me, it was about another year and a half, probably. I came back. I had housemates and, remember at that period I was 19, I was 20, and so all my friends were 21. Everyone was going out to the bars, and I had spent a whole year in Spain going to bars and stuff, and coming back of like, I can't go out and have a glass of wine at a bar. Like, what the heck? It just, that was kind of a weird year. I felt kind of just alone, like didn't have a lot of friends. And then I was working at Joe's Crab Shack as a server. That was kind of, indicative of that period of time. And then, that's when I decided, I'm graduating soon. I want to start dating. And so I wasn't meeting guys at college. I hadn't dated anyone since Dave, which was first semester freshman year. And I, just went online and weeded through a lot of guys and went on some dates and was just like, this is just not fun. I don't like this. I stopped the online dating profile. And then I stopped going on it. And then one day I popped back on and I saw, this is maybe a month or two into having the account, but I got over it very quickly. I went back on and I saw Justin, my ex-husband, and it was like he had studied abroad in Germany. He had a bunch of nieces and nephews, a bunch of photos that seemed really familiar to me. And it turns out, I don't think I've mentioned this, that he also was raised Mormon. Did I mention that?
No, but that's that makes a lot of sense though.
Yeah. And actually my current partner, she was also raised Mormon. So I found, just like we said, there's a certain familiarity of the church, of the culture, like we were talking about. There's certain pieces, certain values that were still very important to me. And so seeing him with his nieces and nephews and seeing him like being wholesome and, wearing a tie in one of his photos and, not just being some bro or some guy that just, that I was seeing so much of at school, something about him was charming and wholesome. And I met him and, our dates were very sweet. We threw a Frisbee at the beach and we did like homemade pizzas and it was just very sweet. And it was kind of a rarity at that time of like actually going on dates and doing things together and not just going to a bar. And he was quirky and silly and fun and just had a certain sort of sense of humor that reminded me of my dad, actually. I remember saying that from the very beginning. I never was just like absolutely like goo goo gaga over him, like, but like it was just sweet and happy and everything felt right, felt good.
Not only that familiarity and being raised in the same religion. Yes, there's things that you like about it that you can discuss. You can say things that will, and it makes sense, exactly. but your baggage makes sense too. Yeah. And unless, like my husband was raised really strict Catholic. So even though it's two different religions, the baggage side of it is very similar,
Yeah, absolutely.
So every once in a while things come up and I'm like, is this little Catholic boy baggage speaking here? But we
can relate on that.
So I get that relating like that must have been like such a relief.
It was, yeah. And then actually, to be honest, with my current partner, I have it much more with her. But Justin, he he kind of left the church just out of convenience because he didn't like going to church. So for him, it wasn't so much of this like, oh, this like decision. It kind of just happened. And so we didn't relate on that level as much, but still like culturally we did, like very similar values and very similar, like the importance of family and spending time together. And I don't know. There was definitely a certain sense of familiarity. Absolutely. Having gone through something similar. Yeah.
So you guys get married and you're working at Merrill Lynch with your dad. And then you have a baby, you stay home for 2 years. Photography continues to come up in your life.
Yep.
Okay. So let's jump in there again. I think we've caught up.
Yeah. I mean, there's teaching in there, but that was, a blip of time.
Teaching. Yeah, that's interesting. But I think that always ties it. You know what? I always find that there are themes in our lives. And so you teaching other people to not be uncomfortable, like you were in Spain, just by learning another language, there's a possibility. And being a teacher makes you a great photojournalist too.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. Absolutely. You're dealing with a lot of raw, different types of personalities. And there's just a certain sort of realness to it. There's nothing sugar-coated at all about it. Teaching was great. And I enjoyed it. I also did acting when I was younger. And so I actually love presenting. I love being in front of people. And so I loved, getting kids engaged and doing skits and all of that. So I had a lot of fun parts with that. But and then I ended up having our daughter, and I was able to stay at home with her for a couple of years. And then during that, and so I'll take off from there. And so during that time is when, I always figured I'd go back to teaching, but when I started getting into photography, it was like, oh, this is my groove. And I just loved it. And I remember the conversation and telling him, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it happen. And that's something I've proven to myself. And that I mentioned in interviews, if I ever go to an interview, it's just, when I decide I'm going to do something, I do it and I make it happen. And so I decided I'm going to be a professional photographer. I'm going to be a professional wedding photographer. And I mapped out how I would get there. And I knew it began with a second shooting. And I got the family shoots down. I mastered everything. I was obsessed with learning everything photography, everything from the technical parts of it to the artistic parts of it. I was listening. I remember walking the stroller and jogging and listening to podcasts nonstop about photography, trying to get better and just constantly learning. So I was in a really intense state of learning for that first year in photography. And then I started second shooting, and that's where I was like, oh my gosh, I love weddings. I love shooting weddings. It's just, I do really well, again, kind of like with teaching, when it's a high energy, go, fast pace, like you're on your feet and you're thinking on the spot and there's nothing boring about it. Like you are just going, and it is intense. You're for 8 to 10 hours, just like on, and you are ready to follow whatever happens, anything unexpected, and being able to take beautiful, quick photos regardless of the circumstances. So I loved it from the very start. And then I started getting into weddings, and like I mentioned, that's kind of when our crisis started. And something else I didn't mention in there was that I actually, one day I woke up with ear ringing, like a ringing in my ear. And to this day, it's still there. But in the very beginning, it was so intense that I thought I had a brain tumor, because there's brain tumors that run in my family. And so I had this period of time where I was like, oh, I think I'm gay and I might have a brain tumor. And it just felt like the world was falling apart.
It kind of is. Well, you're married to this man that you really, at the very, you love, care about, respect, have a child with, planned on being with forever. And you're like, by the way, I'm actually gay.
Yeah, freaking curveball. And of course, my fear is, is this just a life crisis? Like, who just makes up one day that they're gay? All along, I told him I'm at least bisexual, but he was really let's not talk about that too much. And I would bring it up randomly, I really had a heavy crush on my roommate in college, and I would bring that up, and I knew that was a thing, and I knew it was a big thing, but I, for some reason, like just was able to deny it. And it was when I started having crushes towards other women. And then all of a sudden, and also I had no sex drive after having a baby, like at all, like no touching, because it was, I had like healing, and for some reason, regardless, sex was painful. And once it came back, I realized it came back only towards women. And I was like, oh, this is an issue. And that's when I remember just laying in bed being like, holy crap, holy shit. Like, this is really serious stuff. Like, what if I'm actually gay? And that's when that just all spiraled. And I had a couple weeks of panic. Like, I called a psychiatrist. I was like, I need to talk to someone. I was like, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, life crisis. Oh, all these pieces coming together. And I'm such an honest person. I can't keep secrets. I can keep secrets, but I can't. If there's something going on within me and I know it's going to affect our marriage, like, I couldn't keep it from him too long. I knew I needed to tell him what was going on. And so I actually took him out to dinner knowing I needed to let him know what was going on. And it had only been about a month that I was in my head with this crisis, and he could tell something was wrong. He kept asking, well, are you okay? Are you okay? And I took him out to dinner and I told him over dinner, like, this is what's going on. I am not sure what this means for us, but I'm realizing I'm more attracted to women than men. And he's like, well, like, how much so? And I'm like, he's like, are you saying you think you might actually be gay? And I'm like, I don't know. I think I might be. And basically our crisis started. And it was like, I drove down to Southern California because I had a trip planned literally the next morning. But that whole night we were up just crying and shaking of like, what the hell does this mean for us? Because we loved each other and we had, all of our future. We had a new house, our new, townhouse in the Bay Area. And our new baby, we were talking about having a second, and all of a sudden this came out of nowhere, as it seemed. At least it was building within me. But yeah, and so that started, and then, my ear ringing was happening all during that time. And so I hadn't gotten results back from the MRI. It just felt like life was falling apart. It completely was falling apart. And now actually I see how it flares up during stressful times. I think it was all related in a way.
Okay.
Yeah. The doctors think maybe it's Meniere's to a degree or whatever, because I still have it. But during that time, the ear ringing was to a point that I couldn't. It was like I needed to curl in a ball, kind of bad. It was really, really bad. So lots of stuff. I'll let you.
You went through therapy, which was great. You jump in. You're not in denial at this point anymore, but I imagine it would be confusing and not what you want.
No,
this is not the conversation that you want to have. And
no.
and he's crushed. He's hurt.
Yeah.
It's certainly not what he wants to hear. How much longer did it take until we know that was a divorce. Yeah. So how much longer did it take before that occurred? And how was the process in between there? And how did you really determine, like, yeah, this is 100% who I am?
Yeah. So after that, because the ear ringing took over, I actually put more of the focus on that and put the gay thoughts and everything. I shouldn't say the gay thoughts, but I put that crisis to the side. We also were in the process of moving. So we moved to Reno. We were able to put that other crisis to the side and just like ignore it. And maybe just Justin, I think, was like, we're just going to pretend like that's not there for a little bit. Came to Reno, and it was, 2 weeks into being in Reno. So this whole period of time was maybe 3 months at this point. And I woke up from a really, really intense dream about a woman that I like, just a random woman actually. And I woke up that morning and was like, this is real. I know I'm gay. And it was like, crap, like shit. Like I wanted this to not be the thing, but this is a real thing. And I knew if I brought it back up to him again, that our marriage would be in shambles. Like I knew at that point it was serious. And so it was only a matter of 2 days before I told him again what was going on. I was all over websites on emptyclosets.com. It's a site of everyone in similar boats. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is totally my experience. And I had completely convinced myself this was going on. And and so I actually didn't enter therapy until I got to Reno. And it's okay. And I started therapy, and that's when I remember shaking in therapy and just like, how is this like just completely terrified. And so it was about the summer. And so, I mean, even though it felt like forever, it was complete misery. It felt like hell, limbo, just complete horribleness. So a period of, I don't know, May through July. I mean, I remember it was my birthday weekend. So end of July. And this is totally expedited because it was complete just misery of him crying at night and me crying and so many conversations, so much pain. And we decided late July that a separation was probably going to need to happen and that he was becoming more willing to let me go and explore this because like this period of, imagine 2 to 3 months of intense crisis, misery. It's like at some point you have to let things go a little bit. And so I was in, crisis during that period of time. And July, we started having those conversations. We had a trip booked to Hawaii together, actually. So we went to Kauai and we decided on that trip that we definitely would separate. And that was in August. So it was only essentially the summer. A long summer. Very long summer. And we also lived between like 4 different places during that period of time because we lived in like 2 different temporary housing situations. And then like, we were moving the whole summer. It was just the weirdest time. We were moving and in crisis. And so, we just agreed to separate in August. I moved out, went to an apartment in September, late September, early October, maybe. Got my hair cut sometime around there. And that was like basically completely definitive thing for him. Like, oh, she got a haircut. This is real.
That is what happened. Okay. See, I've had my hair shaved before and it didn't do it for me, but
it started down to my chest. And then I got it cut. Like, it was actually a really cute cut. It wasn't enough for me apparently. Of it, like a little A-line cut, and that was the first one. He was like, "Oh," and
that doesn't mean anything, but okay.
He was so attached to my long hair, and he just, I don't know. He's like, "It's actually really cute. I kind of think it's sexy, but you're a different person." And
well, but it's not because of the hair. How long did it take before the divorce was final, and how have things kind of resolved now? Also, you've been doing photography for a couple of years at that point. So catch me up with being able to do that full time.
Yeah. Okay. So during that period of time, I was separated and I was booking weddings during that period of time too, for the following summer. I wasn't sure what my job trajectory would look like because I knew a divorce was probably on its way. And I was really terrified of the idea of being full-time at that point. And especially just having gone through the divorce and all of that uncertainty. And, we have our daughter, and I wasn't able to, I was so close to going full-time at that point anyway, but it just felt like that might break me because it was like, I needed stability. I kept saying, all I need is benefits and stability. Like I just needed something expected. And so I, even though I was booking weddings for the following season, I also was, what was I doing? I was teaching at a middle school that was honestly I'm not going to even say the school names. It was a horrible school situation. And it was very, very difficult and very stressful. And it was only a half-time position. So I knew that it wasn't going to be lasting for me. So during that period of time, I started dating. I actually met my current partner really, really quickly in the game during that period of time because I figured, okay, if I'm going to be separated because I'm gay, I probably should date. And that was the agreement that we both could date. And I went on a few different dates and ended up meeting her very quickly, and started off very slow, but still, it's like, that obviously worked out. And during that time, I was finishing up teaching, doing photography, editing, weddings from the previous, had some editing going on, just different shoots throughout the year. And and then just booking for the following year. And then I actually worked at Merrill Lynch again, just as that stability, as I mentioned. So when I went from that teaching job, I went to Merrill Lynch and I worked at Merrill Lynch for a year and a half again, just because I needed that expected income. And
it's hard to go full time in something like
very,
this.
very hard.
I understand the security and stability.
Yeah. Yeah, especially just having gone through the divorce, I was just like, I need something stable. And so when I was using experience from 6 years prior. I was able to find a job that it's appeared to be a really great job with great opportunity. And I was very grateful because I was using very previous experience of financial advising. And I actually got registered again. So I studied for the Series 7 and 66 a second time, passed them both times, miserable test, miserable period of studying. And that was pretty much my entire last winter. And, and so once I got through that, all I want to do is photography. And I was hoping that, money and security, that I could just be okay with that. But very quickly, I'm just like, no, I want to be doing photography full time. I did the weddings, I edited them, and I took beautiful photos. And some of my favorite weddings I've ever done were just were during that period of time when I was also working at Merrill Lynch. But I also knew, I had a long distance relationship. I had my daughter. I had a full-time job. I could not do the amount of photography I wanted to do. I wanted to do more than that. I couldn't, just a few weddings a year was not enough. And especially because even those few weddings were very stressful to have to edit afterwards and do all the post-processing. And so it wasn't until, 6 months ago that I was hit with almost again, a spiritual realization of, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This has always been what I wanted to be doing. And I needed to just put fear to the side and do it. And it was freaking terrifying to make that decision. And in fact, the first time it came to me, it came out of nowhere. I was in the process of just getting used to, I just passed my testing again, and I'm talking to the financial advisors I worked with about different opportunities. And there were things going on there that made it, not extremely ideal. And I was kind of getting skeptical if there really was much opportunity there as well. But regardless, they just came to me of nope, you're doing photography. And I'm just like, oh, that's scary. I don't know if I actually want that uncertainty and all of that. But it was so evident to me that really is my path, that right. I need that, even if I'm, a starving artist, but I know me, and I know that I'll get to the goals I want to get to, and I'll create the life I want to create. But it's definitely,
You've been good at denying who you really are.
Yes, I'm great at that.
And having it hit you anyway, like a 2x4.
Isn't that funny? Yeah.
Yes. How is the relationship with Justin now, and the situation with your daughter? And has that gotten better? And then we can kind of end on a happy note that you are doing photography. So everything's honestly, everything's really good. I mean, I feel finally just weight lifted in every way. I mean, everything with my ex-husband, with Justin, is good. He sees I really am gay. He's like, okay, glad I dodged that bullet. He's, in the beginning, it was like, what if I'm not, Yeah.
And it was like, what happens if I go out there and I realize this is all just some weird thing and I'm not actually gay? Could I come back? And because, we loved each other. And it was like this big, more than a hunch, more of an internal realization. And I think for him seeing, okay, no, this really was real, he's able to completely let go now. And our relationship is fine. It's good. I mean, it's even totally friendly. He lives only 7 minutes away. We do 50-50. He's an amazing dad, and we're both, we do things together. We go to the pumpkin patch together. We're able to do stuff together with her, for her.
Good.
He loves it. So everything.
So let's end on embracing who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you encourage someone else?
Don't make my mistakes of denying who you are constantly. I would encourage people to, if something's wrong, if you feel like something's wrong, just listen, and don't be afraid to listen. And that living authentically and congruently to who you are is so important. And when you don't, it's just it's going to come up anyway, but not in a good way. Or it's going to be harder. It's going to be much harder than if you just listened the first time.
Thank you so much for being on, Amber. I really appreciate it. Your story is really astounding, and I'm very thankful.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you for taking the time to get naked with us. If you'd like to bear it all,